Okay.
You're good. No more red light up there.
Thank you, Mackenzie. All right, welcome everybody to our Planning Commission this evening. Let's go ahead and get started with a Pledge of Allegiance. If you all stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So this evening I have asked Commissioner Summerhays to give us a thought and or prayer, so we'll turn the time over to him.
Okay. Many months ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, but I suggested that I might run every street in the city because I thought that would be good just to actually physically see the actual physical conditions of our neighborhoods. And I've done that as part of running for city council, but just is actually threefold. City council, what I wanted to do as my planning commission, and also Ironman training. Just so triple efficiency going on right now. But I've covered about 32 miles in the city so far in the last few weeks. And it's been great to see with your own eyes how the city's developed over time, some inconsistencies in streets and sidewalks or the lack thereof, and how different subdivisions have been developed over time. And I think that's, my thought is I'm not suggesting everybody on the commission runs every street in the city, but take a walk through certain neighborhoods. Drive up to a different neighborhood that is far away from your home, and it's not that far of a drive. It's only 3.5 miles or so. It's not too far wherever which way you go. Some are steeper than others, but just to get out and see the neighborhoods, I think is very, very valuable. So that's my thought. I would say that tools, as we try to plan for the city, is the county has a great property search website that provides acreages and just context for whether they're associations or single-family fee simple type of ownerships throughout the city. Those are great tools. Google Earth's a great tool as well, going beyond just a regular Google Maps. So that's my thought, and I will offer a short prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful to meet as a planning commission this evening. We're grateful for the opportunity to serve, and pray that Thou will bless us as we conduct the city's business and the public's business and managing the land use affairs of the city. And say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for that. That's I think it is very helpful to get out and see the city. It's not a big city geographically or population, I guess, but it is helpful to get out and see it. So we do have a new member of the Planning Commission. We have a new commissioner, Matt Larson. Welcome. We're happy to have you here. I'm happy to have a full commission. It's great. Maybe we can ask you to take a minute or two, introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, what you do, and
okay,
whatever else you want to tell us.
yeah, so Matt Larson, I've raised in the area. I grew up in Bountiful, so not far. We've lived in Centerville for 17 years. Married, we have 4 children, mostly grown. I'm an architect by profession, so design planning background, and so I've been working on the Salt Lake City Airport project for 8 years now, but the company I'm with, so.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Where do you live? What part of the city?
Toby Drive, kind of west of the junior high school.
Cool.
That neighborhood there. West of Spencer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks. All right, let's jump right into our first item of business. So we have the first thing we have, I guess, 2 things. We have a preliminary subdivision and a final site plan to review for the lane. And both administrative decisions, just to point out, Mackenzie was very helpful to point this out beforehand. The preliminary subdivision has been scheduled for a public hearing. The final site plan does not technically require a public hearing.
That's
So,
correct.
but let's run with, we'll talk about both of these together. They are the same project. So let's turn the time over to Mackenzie to introduce these.
Chair Daly and members of the commission. So provided in the agenda was my original staff report. I emailed you out an update. I provided the applicant with a copy of that. And he has also provided printouts of some of the relevant pages of the revised civil plans that have been attached to the agenda item. So I'm going to go in order of the original staff report. So the final site plan review, final site plan needs to conform to its associated conceptual site plan. Commission reviewed that in July. So that is at your discretion whether you think this conforms to their conceptual site plan. Staff believes that it does sufficiently conform. And then in the original staff report, there was just a few items that were not met by the civil plans that we had at the time. Namely, lot number 7 was too close to the property line. The drainage system had not yet been worked out with Truck World. It still is in the works to get all of the lanes drainage to a city utility. And as in the staff report, it's cost prohibitive to get it to Porter Lane. And so they are working with their northwesterly neighbors to connect to their drainage system, which then connects to the frontage road. And so they are in the works getting an agreement with that. In the provided printouts that shows the 15-foot easement they've been working on with Truck World to get to frontage road. And I invited Kevin Campbell for any drainage questions, so if you have drainage questions, please address them to him and not to me. And then the other item for the final site plan is that the street, the pavement, did not meet our 27-foot requirement. In previous plans, the 27 feet, but they had included curb and gutter, so that didn't meet city specs. So they've provided new plans, and let me see if I can pull them up on one of my, there we go. This looks like the right one, okay. So in their revised plans to be able to make the street 27 feet of pavement, they're proposing removing the sidewalk on the west side of the entrance so that they can maintain the house sizes and the lot sizes without getting the street too close or the sidewalk too close to 12. In the memo I sent out, zoning code 1232-055 requires sidewalk on both sides, but it says an exception may be provided to this requirement if an alternate integrated development pathway system connecting to the public right-of-way and serving the dwellings is provided to satisfy the requirement for both sidewalks. So that's up for your debate, whether you think that meets that section of the code. They do connect to the city system at Porter Lane. This is just their proposal so that they can maintain the design of the subdivision that they would like. So that's the final site plan. Nothing much is different in the subdivision review. Let's see. Again, drainage is required to prove that they can handle all of their storm drainage. And then there was a note about utilities. Centerville Duo Creek irrigation district provided them some requirements, so I've drafted that into some conditions of approval. And then lastly, in the municipal code, if a proposed project's located within 100 feet of a critical flood area, and then it specifically calls out Dual Creek, which is on Porter Lane, then they need to provide Davis County Development and Construction Permit, which we have not yet received. I don't know their timeline, so I don't know how quick the county is at getting those to us, or if they already need the final subdivision already approved. The applicant can speak to that. And then just a final note, as I wrote into the memo, as staff, I haven't really talked to other staff, it would make sense to have both of the applications kind of go together. So if you table one, it would make sense to table the other, because they're both hinging on the same items. That drainage and that street and sidewalk issue, if you don't want to approve those tonight. So in that memo, I drafted a tabling motion and an approval motion for both items, just to give you kind of a framework to go off of, for whatever direction you want to go tonight. So, there you go.
Chair Daly, I could just weigh in probably for Commissioner Larson's benefit also to understand. This is not a traditional single-family subdivision. It may look like it because you have 12 single-family proposals, but the property is zoned multifamily. City has chosen in its residential medium zone for multifamily to allow single-family uses. And so the oddity here is that typically RM is developed predominantly with multifamily, as you know, develops with a single lot development, and then you can either rent out all the units in the multifamily, or you can convert it to a planned unit development plat so that they can be for sale. And essentially, that's what's happening here. It's with the single-family homes, though. And so it's a single piece of property being developed with a PUD plat. It's going to have its own individual lots and common spaces associated with it. And so that's why they're running both together, because the subdivision plat needs to match the final site plan. So just wanted that clarity in case.
Thank you. Yeah.
In case it was kind of like, well, why is this single family? I don't understand what the site plan is with the subdivision.
Yeah, makes sense. So, I have, and I don't know if Mackenzie, you want to handle this one? So our city ordinance requires within 100 feet of, in this case, Dual Creek, you got to get that Davis County Development Construction Permit, even though it's across the street. It's on the other side of Porter Lane from them.
And even though it's been put into underground system, so is our code a little outdated? Yes, because Dual Creek was, I don't know the term anymore. When you uncover a creek, it's daylighting. I don't know what it's called when you cover the creek over, but that happened in the last 2 years, that section was repaired and Dual Creek was put into pipes. So I don't think it will have a great effect on the property since it's been managed by the county. The county is the one that put Dual Creek underground. But it's a section of code that I found in review that still applies like that.
Okay.
Yeah, Davis County actually requires it, and then our code reflects their requirement. Anything within 100 feet of the drainage channel that they have under their jurisdiction needs to be reviewed by the county.
All right, does anybody else have any questions for staff?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the existing building and the property line there. There's no problem, like, because that, by creating the property line so close to those existing building, that's fine, right?
Are we talking the homes to the south or any of the lots?
Southwest, yeah, that's the existing, yep, that one. Like, what is the setback for that, and is that the proper, where the property line always has been?
That is where the property line always
Okay.
has been, so that home
So that's
conforms to
fine.
its own
Okay.
zone.
Oh, right, thank you. And then the other question is, where the sidewalk stops on that west side am I seeing like, a street marked
Crosswalk. yes.
crosswalk?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Showing curb cuts there too, right?
yes.
Okay.
Just quickly, so to confirm, Lisa, you're comfortable with the new drainage easement?
I'm working with their attorney. They submitted a recorded easement already, but it wasn't sufficient. So they're still working on getting that, and we will, so it's still a condition.
Do you mind detailing why you didn't feel it met your, or the standard, or?
Yeah, it was an
Because the
issue
report
that-
says rigorous, what, needed something more rigorous.
Yeah, it was an issue that the city engineer raised. The initial easement only stubbed out into Truck World, and the point was, if they're going to drain all of their water, their storm drain, it has to go all the way out to the public system, which is in the frontage road. So we didn't want just half of that, because it has to be essentially, you know, permanently protected drainage all the way out to the public facility in frontage road. And so I think we've also talked with Truck World, everybody's on the same page. They're willing to do that. They just have to get it re-engineered, and then they're going to send us the easement draft and the legal description for review before they record it.
So it's kind of unrelated, but we asked in our last commission meeting that Truck World said they were going to come back, and maybe this was why they didn't come back, because this came up and maybe affected their final site plan. I don't know if that's speculation or not, but it seems like maybe.
No, I think well, there was some communication in the beginning, miscommunication, but I think Truck World's on board with this, and it
Okay.
doesn't significantly impact Truck World. Truck World has to make some improvements as well. And so we've talked with both applicants, saying whoever goes first is essentially going to have to bond for it and build it, and then they can debate amongst each other the timing and the payment of that. But essentially, if the lane is ahead, then these are the improvements they'll put in and have to bond for to get their permits.
And Chair Day, I think it would be good to have our city engineer comment, because I believe that when we were talking about their water, it's a statement of that they're detaining their water on their site to some level, and then there is some overflow that is occurring, and I don't know the volume changes for it, but our engineer could probably.
Sure. Would you
Be
be
that
willing to
change.
come up and address that for us?
Yeah, just maybe a little bit of background. This land, as you might know, it naturally drains to the north and not to Porter Lane. So there's a several-foot fall. They'd have to fill, maybe 5 to 6 feet to get it to drain out to Porter Lane. The development to the east, Porter Walton Towns, maybe a quarter of that drains to the south. A quarter of that drains to the north, and the rest drains out to Porter Lane. There's a 20-inch high-pressure gas line in Porter Lane that's difficult to get under for drainage. So again, as Lisa mentioned, we want to make sure that CW land, the lane, has the right to get the water all the way to city infrastructure frontage road. It sounds like the Truck World is going to have to improve their detention facility somewhat, but the lane will also have a detention facility. So that's designed so that it'll slow the water down, such that it's kind of pre-development flow that will be seen at the frontage road. And that's kind of the general idea of the detention basins.
So with the detention basin, the lane, that wouldn't necessarily affect any detention for Truck World, but just make sure that the easement, the drainage through Truck World would be able to handle what's being detained on the lane.
Yeah, the lane has an area for detention which discharges into another detention area that goes through a pipe system that has the easement over the top of it. So there's a series of 2 detention basins, one on the lane property, one on Truck World, and then a pipe system that's restricted that daylights out at the swell at the frontage road. I don't know if hopefully that answered your question.
So you can see on the drawing that we've pulled up, to the left there, that's the truck world, the large detention basin, and then a small detention pond on the lane to the right.
Yeah, and that large detention basin, I believe, on the truck world, they're moving it to the west. They may be filling that in somewhat and paving over that, and then they're creating a new detention basin just west of the lane detention pond.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't allow them to combine their detention ponds and thereby get a little bit more volume where they have a reciprocal detention agreement in some floors? Does that make sense you're losing the volume for your slopes in both detention ponds? Am I making sense in asking that question?
That might be something that they could look at if they wanted to come up with a private agreement on a joint detention area. We didn't necessarily push for that. We do want to have the water that's coming out of the lane subdivision treated before it enters the truck world site. So there is some rationale for
Okay.
maybe having them separate.
Well, and I would say with the LID regulations, I mean, most developments are now required to retain their own water, so I would want them to retain as much as they can, or detain.
And I don't disagree. What I'm saying is I've seen larger master plan, whether commercial or residential communities, where they may have a master detention plan that
Yeah, and that might make
accommodates
sense
some
with a
things.
planned development,
Yeah,
but I
it's-
think where you
this
have
is a little
completely
different, yeah.
different projects, I would,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's in
Different.
the
Yeah, these are
long-term
different
best
uses.
interest
They
to
are,
handle
they
too
are. I'm
much.
just trying to think, long-term, if it benefits the city in providing additional volume capacity, though it might not be a lot, just.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have additional detention down along the frontage road in those swales,
Awesome.
and those are city-owned, so we have a little more say in what happens there, how they're cleaned. But probably the main purpose is so that they can treat their own water before they discharge it into truck world.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick, so the detention facility will be maintained by, they'll have an HOA?
Yep, the lanes detention area will be maintained by the lane HOA, and then the truck world detention basin by truck world.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you.
Thanks. Yep.
And just to expand on that question, Lisa's right, they both will sign a maintenance agreement with the city on those detentions.
Yes, I was just thinking about that, they likely will. We're doing long-term stormwater maintenance agreements, so we'll have to add that, maybe if you could add that as a condition, actually, that.
We just want to make sure that we have some ability to enforce maintenance of it.
Okay.
One last question, Kevin, just
Yeah,
for
go
staff,
ahead.
is the fire marshal okay with this long of a lane and the turn, as it relates to our equipment that we have in the city? Sometimes our city, or, it's not really the city, it's the South Davis Metro, but sometimes ordinances and codes don't quite match up with the equipment we have as part of our
Right.
fleet, for lack of a better word. The fire marshal's okay?
Yeah, the fire marshal provided some feedback about striping, no parking, and signage, and then has signed off on that.
Okay.
So on a corollary to that, why is the north side red striped if we're eliminating a portion of the sidewalk on the south side? Is there a particular reason, or is that just sort of the way it's evolved?
You mean the west side?
Sure. Top and bottom list.
Bottom.
No, don't go there. North, south, east, west.
think that's
Matt,
more
can you help?
The upper side and the lower side.
There should be a north arrow on there.
I only know enough to be dangerous, so if I'm asking the wrong direction of questions, just tell me. But the common sense is, well, why not park on the side where the sidewalk is contiguous?
I think that's an applicant question,
Sure.
their reasoning for
Good
the
question,
side they chose.
From their cars. I would rather.
Can you also,
There's sidewalk on both sides, though.
Except for that strip that they've taken out.
Yeah,
So
just that curve,
If this
yeah.
is your fire, your fire lane is on the east side, why are we putting the sidewalk there? Is, I think, what Mason's getting at, as opposed to the other side where if you're gonna have sidewalk, that's probably where you're gonna park as opposed to not.
It might be.
Is that what, am I kind
Yeah,
of
although.
getting that? That's a good point that you're bringing up.
Fair enough, but arguing the other side and piggybacking off of what Commissioner Chagruth said, if you're actually walking just to be out, you might not want to be on the side with all the cars. You might want the cars to decamp on the other side.
And it may be according to where the fire hydrant is and the access there. They may have a specific reason for that.
Fair enough, just curious.
Give it a minute, we'll ask the applicant if they have any answers for that.
I have one more question
Yes.
about, is the 20-foot, like the T on the north side, the 20-foot wide drive okay?
Yes, because that is kind of like where the private drive ends, and it's just access to those last few lots. And the Hammerhead still meets fire marshal standards. So
Turn radius.
Turn radius, thank you.
So the 20 feet is okay for that? Okay.
How would they be addressed?
That I do not know. So that's final plat, that usually happens at final subdivision, and usually the Public Works Director has quite a lot of say to that. So, I don't get to choose. I'm not sure.
So piggybacking off of that, sorry, is if we approve both of these today, they won't come back to us, correct?
The final site plan will not, but the subdivision still has one more step. And the subdivision then would go on to city council after you've seen it one more time.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other questions for staff? All right, then we will invite the applicant to come forward and discuss any of the points that we've talked about, any of the points in the updated staff report, talk about parking on the upside of the street, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, please.
So yeah, Zach Swenson, I represent CW Urban for this lane subdivision application. I'll just go ahead and jump in, kind of discuss some of the points that you guys have brought up. First off, on the sidewalk, if you take a look at the site plan, it's obviously a really unique parcel, specifically the entrance, and that frontage is a very narrow frontage. And so to meet the requirement for a 27-foot road, you're really taking up a large portion of that space. And so how that road interacts with the existing home to the southwest, and then specifically lot 12, if we were to have a sidewalk there, it becomes a less desirable product. The road comes closer to that lot number 12, as well as really encroaches the existing home on that southwest side. And so we felt that providing adequate access to the public road with one sidewalk or on one side of the street, and then also having sidewalk on two sides of the street within the development, that we were providing the best development concept with the piece of, or the parcel we were given. So that's kind of the argument there, and I truly do believe that it makes for a better concept. As for the Dual Creek flood, the distance from that irrigation or drainage. So as she pointed out, that drainage is underground at this point. However, it's across the street from our parcel. I think it's 90 feet or so approximately from just the front of our parcel. The nearest building that we have is approximately 240 feet from that Dual Creek storm drain or floodplain. And so we didn't really view that as an issue, and it hadn't been really raised as a big issue. But if necessary, happy to kind of chase down that additional application. We just didn't feel that it would be necessary due to that distance. The hammerhead, as she pointed out, 20-foot width within that hammerhead turnaround is per the fire code standard, so it shouldn't be an issue. We've dealt with that on quite a few private lanes like this. Let's see. Just pointing out again on the sidewalks, there is a crosswalk with curb cut to kind of show how that pedestrian flow, ingress, egress would take place. So that does help a little bit. Regarding the storm drain issue, As they've mentioned, we previously had recorded an easement. The legal description for that easement was just the portion of the truck road property that contained a detention system. We recorded that thinking that was adequate. However, as Kevin has pointed out, we've been asked to amend or essentially supersede that initial amendment, replace with a more expansive easement, and that's in process. We didn't ever consider draining into their system entirely because that's a pretty big ask to ask a neighboring property to take on that amount of capacity. So we detain a large portion of that. Our discharge rates are rated at 50-year flood event. It's pretty standard that 25-year flood event is what you would rate your discharge at. And it's a pretty small amount. As the detention system currently stands on Truck World's property, that there's adequate capacity for both Truck World's existing discharge and our discharge that we're proposing. They're concurrently going through a parking lot expansion application or site plan amendment that would increase the impermeable surface and then increase that discharge into their system. So we're working through kind of how that's going to work out, but both parties are highly motivated to get that one figured out. And so we don't see it being an issue or reason to hold up this site plan application. Let's see, is there anything that I haven't addressed?
Striping.
Striping of the sidewalk?
Yeah, so parking on the,
Oh, yeah, perfect. So I guess you could say that was probably just by happenstance that that side of the road was blocked off, no parking versus parking. I do think that there is a point to be made that the sidewalk where most pedestrian traffic would occur, I think it's desirable to have the parking on the opposite side of that. But in either instance, I think it's kind of a wash. I don't know whether one provides substantially more benefit than the other. So happy to make the change, but didn't feel like it was a big issue to address.
perfect.
Anything else that you guys, any concerns?
No, I
Happy to
think
speak to.
you've covered all the questions
Yeah.
that we had beforehand, but I don't know if anybody else has any other questions that have come up. Yes, Mason?
I do. And as for the striping, just as a side note, I recognize that that's not really here nor there. It was mostly
yeah,
out of
yeah.
curiosity. But I want to understand the assertion about the no need for a permit from the county because of Dual Creek. I'd like to understand better the distances that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You said that it was over 250 feet away?
So the Dual Creek drainage or flood pipe is I guess what I understand that to be, is on the south side of Quarter Lane. And so from that portion, or from that pipe to the frontage of our property, it's approximately 90, 100 feet. I'm just guessing. I measured on Google Earth before I came here, but I don't have anything surveyed. But the distance from that pipe to our first proposed building is what I was calling out as 240 feet. So nothing within that initial frontage or initial portion of the property would be worrisome for a flood event. But the majority of that flood event concern was mitigated when that pipe was taken underground.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And then I guess one last thing on the zoning of the property. It's residential medium is I think in the code is what it's listed as. We had considered a townhome development at some point. However, the density that we would have been able to achieve for a project in there with 2 acres of land would have been equal to the detached product. And so we wouldn't have gotten any additional density, and so a detached product is obviously more desirable for the buyer. That's kind of the rationale behind that as opposed to towns.
I have a quick question. I'm noticing, and I think you guys have come up with a really great solution, and specifically to the sidewalk issue on that west side. I'm noticing that on lots 8 and 5, they are the only homes that are not going to be accessible from sidewalk to their actual home unless you go into the street and then onto like a driveway. Is there a reason against just keeping that sidewalk through that curve there?
No, that's a fair question. As the parcel is currently laid out, or the parcel area for each lot is currently laid out, a sidewalk, if we did install it, would be within one of those person's lots or people's lots. We hadn't really considered that. I think that's a valid point.
I just think especially with ADA, and I'm assuming that this product would probably attract maybe younger tenants, maybe not, but having any kind of strollers or things where people, or just kids needing to go to a house, I mean, they can always go along the grass, but sometimes with ADA and strollers, it's not possible. And that would require them to go out into the road, and that's just a safety issue, I think.
Yeah.
To comment on that,
Go ahead.
it appears that the entry, the way it's laid out anyway, the entries to the units are from the driveway in all cases, rather than from the sidewalk. And those ones on the end do have a path from the driveway to the main entry. So that appears to be the intended approach.
And I think what Becky's saying is.
You'd have to go to the
you
street.
get for access in and out of your home, but you don't have community, quote-unquote, access.
I mean, direct
to-
access to the sidewalk.
Yeah,
I
from the community sidewalk to the home front door. You'd have to jump off the sidewalk. If you're walking down your neighbor's home from lot 10 to 8, for example, I think, Becky, is what you're getting at, is that sidewalk ends.
It ends.
It doesn't go to continue to their front door or their driveway to their front door.
And there is literally, no, it's sort of 5 and 8 are sort of, stuck there because you can't cross the street and then go over to 7 and then go to 8. That's still crossing the street. I mean, you could cross the street just like you would on the crosswalks, but I just, especially with kids, and if there's any kind of ADA or stroller situation, that's just something that's, I don't know.
No, that's totally a fair point. The hammerhead dimension, I mean, that's regulated by fire code, so there's nothing really we could have changed there. If you eliminate the fire, or the hammerhead turnaround, you need an alternative entrance, which obviously this site would not have. So that was the big constraint. As for maybe an additional curb cut with a crosswalk, some crosswalk lines, and maybe kind of like a little bit of a platform on lot 8, if that makes sense.
Could you not just curve it around?
Yeah, I don't think
That's what
Becky's asking
I'm
for
not
that.
asking for, I'm just
Becky's
asking.
just saying, can you just
Can you
continue
just
the
go like
sidewalk
this?
into their driveway?
Just around the curve.
Just
Around that curve.
continue on the curve.
Yeah, we would definitely consider doing so.
I mean, does that doesn't affect anything on, it would affect the lot size, you're saying, of
Yeah, it
8
would
and
affect the
5.
lot size.
But
Are you saying you would have that wrap the entire hammerhead, the sidewalk that would go all the way around the easternmost portion of that hammerhead arm?
He's asking about the east and the west.
yeah, I
Not
just
the
am
curve.
saying,
Sorry,
you're riding a wheelchair.
Yep.
Come over here. You cannot access this house unless you
oh,
can
okay,
go
gotcha. I
out,
apologize.
in here, and then that way, or that way. You can't go to that house unless you enter from here, which requires you to go onto the street. Similarly, right here, you
Yeah.
just need that to come by like that.
No, that's, I appreciate you calling that out. We'd be happy to address that concern. Preferably conditional upon approval with the subdivision and not holding up the site plan application.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
It seems like, I just want to be clear, there's off-street parking for all these units. For how many stalls?
I believe it's 6 stalls. I think it's 0.5 guest stalls per unit with 12 units, and so those 6 stalls are provided within the private lane, and then the other parking exists within the garages of the homes and the driveway. So it's adequately parked.
Great.
One follow-up on the Hammerhead. What controls will there be to make sure that it doesn't get filled with, say, a garbage bin or people parking there?
Can't get out of the driveway.
As for somebody placing a garbage can or potentially parking, I think addressing that within an HOA or the HOA and CCNRs.
And that's already been addressed in the CCNRs. Have those been drafted yet?
That has not been addressed, but if needs be, happy to address that one.
Because the red striping is just going to be on the east side of the street or west or whatever you guys
East.
decide. But it's not,
East Mason, east.
well, it was 50/50, right?
The wrong 50.
Yeah. So, is it gonna continue up through the T? Like, I just am wondering about the call out here.
It hadn't been pointed out previously by the fire marshal.
And if it's not
If
necessary, it's fine.
it's a small thing, I think we'd be happy to make that adjustment so
Yeah.
that there aren't any issues. But I guess I hadn't been concerned about it previously because the review of the fire marshal kind of mitigated my concern.
That's fine.
Okay?
I just want to say, I know you've been constrained by the density allowances for this lot, and that's why you were saying you're doing a detached product here, but I will say that I'm really excited about this. Maybe this is not like a standard thing that you guys do or whatever, but I do see some real use for what's happening. I think you've thought through a great use of space. I think it's awesome that it's not just a box you drive up to, it's actually like the driveway, the garage is on the side. I think that's gonna make a really nice front-facing view of the home. And it looks like, I can't really tell all of the floor plans, but it looks like some of them may have master on the main options, which is a great thing for older people. I just think that you've done a lot of thought and some good stuff here, so thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Good. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you guys so much, appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and proceed with the public hearing for the, what are we doing? For the preliminary subdivision. Gotta make sure I get it right. So we'll take a moment now and open the public hearing. Invite anybody from the public who would like to speak to the preliminary subdivision to step up, introduce yourself. Okay. Seeing nobody rushing forward to speak, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Yeah, so any other further questions for staff?
I have one.
Go ahead.
This is just to help educate myself. Can you just help me understand the plat? And why on the plat, the private drive is just labeled private drive, but it contains all their open space? Why aren't they separate parcels?
Hopefully I can answer it if I'm thinking correctly. So you're asking if the private drive, it's listed as private drive, why is it part of the common
Yeah,
space?
why is it's labeled private drive and then everything's labeled common space. Why are their detention facility and their open space at the entrance, why aren't those separate parcels? Why are they all one parcel?
Good question. So the way often planned unit development plats work is you create an area that you're intending to sell. And that can be broadly used. In this case, it's quite broadly used, where they're selling a parcel of ground along with the footprint of the home. A townhome, often you'll just see they sell the unit from wall to wall and the ground underneath. So you've got an area that goes into the private sale, and when a person takes that in fee title, it'll be theirs and they own that. Often you'll see like driveways. You don't have it in this particular case, I don't think on the plat, but driveways can be listed as common space if the HOA wants to take care of it, or it can be limited common space where it's granted to use by right to a specific unit, and the unit owner takes care of that driveway. And then you have the other areas, including your drives, your open spaces, your play areas, whatever it comes into, those are listed as common, and usually you see an overlaying of public utility where the utilities run in. So it's really the developers trying to figure out how they want to market and who's going to take care of what. So the roads will be in common, some of the landscaping entrances will be in common, the detention will be in common, and so they're not listed as separate parcels. It's the units sitting inside this large piece of ground become individual parcels inside the larger parcel, and the larger parcel remaining part that's not in privatized is listed as common.
And they have no open space requirement.
Single family does not require an open space.
So if they wanted to, one day, they could say, hey, we don't have enough parking here, so we're gonna wipe out the front landscape and just do a little parking lot right there.
In simple theory, they could come back and ask for an amendment to that, but the question becomes, you've already maximized your density, and you're right, you could turn it
They
into
don't
a parking
have,
space.
right, so they could do anything with that space up front. They don't have to keep it as open space or landscape. The only open landscape they have to keep is their detention facility. because it provides
Under
the
single family,
stormwater.
you're correct, under our ordinances, single family is exempted from the minimum amount of common open space.
Yep, okay.
But I do think, from an economic standpoint, for them to have common space, driving in, seeing the landscaped area,
Sure.
I would assume that would be a more advantageous sell for
So I
them.
have to pay my HOA fee to maintain it, and I have a birthday party with 15 kids coming over, and there's no parking, and so did the neighbor across the street, and I'm just saying parking is crazy. So I just was curious.
Yeah,
They can do whatever they want, it's their HOA.
yeah.
And Heidi, you bring up a point, I mean, the Brighton Townhomes just to the east has a serious problem with parking right now. But again, unfortunately, it's their problem as an HOA.
You think they have a serious problem?
Yeah. Their neighbors, I live not too far from there, so I hear from people that live
From them?
there. Yeah. They have residents parking in their visitor stalls, and
Yeah.
it's an enforcement nightmare for the
Yeah.
HOA to go to a resident and say, hey, you're using this, we're gonna have to fine you. It's a tough situation, but that's part of an HOA. And people buy into it, sometimes they just don't know they're bought into what an HOA really is.
Yeah, often the garage becomes the storage space, and so they
Yeah.
park somewhere else, and that is very common in multifamily development and planned unit developments.
So going back to the question about the county permit, could we ask some more questions about that to our city engineer, Chair Daly?
Yeah, you bet.
You okay with that?
Yeah, thank you for maximizing how much I have to pay out tonight.
Let's get our money's worth out of them.
So my question basically is, if the ordinance specifically says, and it does, that if you're within 100 feet, the project, not buildable buildings, but if the project is within that number of feet, then you have to go out and get a permit. I'm curious, just from sort of a practical boots on the ground standard, if we, as a body, say, yeah, it's fine, move forward without a permit, what are some of the risks associated with that?
This one's fairly simple because of the fact that you don't have a structure within 100 feet. I think about the pastures, they have a structure that they're proposing within 100 feet of Bernard Creek. This one's going to be pretty cut and dry, where the county's going to check it off and kind of sign it over because, again, you don't have a building. They are required to go through the process and get the permit from the county because the development is within 100 feet. But in reality, it's going to be kind of a check the box, very simple process. There's not going to be any holdup that I can see.
And maybe to Mason's point, was that self-imposed through our own ordinance, or is that being imposed on us by Davis County Flood Control?
Corey mentioned it's, Davis County has an ordinance, and then we kind of copy that to make sure we're
Correct.
mimicking
Okay.
that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for staff, or anybody else like to discuss this amongst ourselves, I guess? Great. Well, I'll start then. Couple of thoughts. You know, when Truck World was here, what, a month ago?
A month ago.
Yeah. You know, they brought us in an application of a conceptual site plan that was short on quite a bit of stuff. And we kind of told them, yeah, we'll pass it for now, but bring back a final site plan that's watertight, I think was the phrase that I used at the time. Now we're looking at a final site plan here for this one, and I could be convinced otherwise, but I don't feel like this one's watertight. We got some questions and some outstanding types of things that are kind of still remaining. So, you know, that's kind of my initial thought. Are we close? Yeah, we're close. But we're not, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'd like to hear what others have to say about it and.
Chair
other
Daly,
thoughts.
if I could just weigh in and maybe sway.
Sure. I said I could be convinced otherwise.
This is
so-
a PR sway, and that's all it is.
You haven't let us try to sway him back the other way, Lori. Because some of
Yeah,
us might,
I'm doing
might
it.
try to.
I'm doing the sway because I know what's going on in the background with Truck World and so forth. You're right, Truck World came in with something that wasn't all that great and asked for a punt, and you gave them the 1 yard line on the punt, and they've had a long ways to go. They wanted to be on this agenda. They are trying to create that watertight, and under that watertight, they have put extreme amount of pressure on staff to let them get some clearing and grading going because of the asphalt issues that come up. They're scheduled for your 27th. We anticipate that they're ready to go on the 27th. My public relations sway is the lane, if the lane's cooperative, because they're doing a partnership on the easement, and Kevin has been heavily involved with both engineers, and we're basically there on the drainage issue. They're hoping the lane can get somewhat started, because under the lane's permit, they could start the clearing for their detention and so forth and be that much ahead. Now, that's not trying to sway you to bend your arm backwards. That's just an issue that I think that because they're a partnership, they are hoping the lane can get their final site plan approved. Because if they get their final site plan approved, we at a staff level can let that agreement partnership open up for both parties to get things going before the weather makes it difficult. You're not required to.
Okay. Thank you, Corey. Anybody else?
So I'll weigh in. I came into the meeting inclined to table. Based on what I've heard today, I'm more inclined to approve, because even though, agreed, it's not watertight, my two primary concerns were mostly mitigated. The remaining one is that if we don't have an easement to allow for a drainage, and who knows if Truck World, you know, what if they go out of business tomorrow and it all goes completely sideways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is my greatest degree of concern. But given what I've heard, I feel like that could be approved as a strict condition.
Mason, what other conditions, how do you feel about Becky's point about the wrapping the sidewalk for the final site plan?
Yeah, it's agreeable. I think that's something that the applicant said he would already do. It's worth a condition. The other one being the permitting.
I mean, the permitting is part of the plat as opposed to the final site plan, or are you suggesting you want to add it to a condition on the final site plan as well, making a condition of both of them? Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, I thought it was on both for some reason.
I think he asked for a specific one, and it might be easier. I'm fine with it.
Does that make sense? So on the staff recommendation, the county permit is
Yeah.
on that recommendation, but not on the final site plan
Yeah.
recommendation.
I thought it was on both. That's my bad.
That's okay. I was actually, didn't key on to that
Yeah.
until
The-
just now as I was
The point being
flipping
is
back and
that
forth.
even though it's sort of a check-the-box kind of thing, you got to follow the ordinance. And the ordinance, in my mind, says if the project is there, you do this. Okay, well, that has to be done.
And I agree with that.
So,
Okay. Becky, I know you,
Yeah, I think we should just move forward. I think it's really close. I mean, I feel really good about what we've seen. We saw an initial one that they've come back. This is the second time we've seen them? Third?
Second.
They've listened to what we've asked them to do. They've been trying to work with staff. I don't anticipate if we make these conditions, I don't anticipate a problem. So,
I have a question for Lisa. So if we're requiring the wraparound sidewalk, and this might come back, but is that going to be part of the common area, and therefore is it both a condition on the final site plan as well as the preliminary plat, because it will affect the plat layout of the common areas?
Yes.
So we should make that a condition
On both.
of both approvals, if we choose that. Okay, and then on the long-term detention agreement that you referred to earlier, that would be the same thing, right? They would be subject to both the site plan
well-
approval as well as the subdivision
And
plan.
if you could also specifically mention the drainage easement. It does say that, I think in the preliminary, that they have to get, let's see.
You say in number 2, channel easements?
Well, I mean, on the drainage easement, it does say, in the tabling, it says receive approval of a drainage plan. Oh, yeah, receive approval of a drainage plan under the plat. But I would also like receive a drainage approval, and that's where you could put, and a long-term storm drain maintenance agreement. And then also obtain, I think it's on, where's the condition? Anyway, add another condition that they have to get a drainage easement all the way out to frontage road. And in my opinion, that's on both,
So can we go back to, and this is back to Mason, what you were saying about like, if it's on the ordinance, we got to do it. Is there any, it sounded like you were saying with the change, with uncovering and covering, sounded like it seemed a little bit obtuse to also have that. Is there a way to,
Are you talking about the permit from Davis County?
oh yeah, so it's Davis County.
It's the-
Yeah,
just
it's
in
ordinance
yours. It'll
required,
be
so they have
easy.
to do
That's
it,
not
whether
us.
they get a letter or a
Okay.
permit.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no wiggle room there. Just-
Okay.
It's a condition. And then it's condition number 3, where you could add the easement all the way out to frontage road. On the final site plan, applicant shall provide a drawing for the improvements needed on this truck world. That's where I would add the easement. And then just add that condition to,
To number 3 on the final site plan.
yeah.
well, should we do this one at a time? We'll start with the final site plan. Anybody would like to make a motion?
I will take a stab at a motion. Help me along here. Friendly amendments welcome. I hereby make a motion to approve the final site plan for the Lane subdivision at 644 West, 400 South, with the following conditions 1 and 2. 3, adding the language after for the Lane subdivision drainage and easement agreements inclusive of a long-term maintenance, detention maintenance agreement.
Well, that one's actually, and a drainage easement all the way out to frontage road.
And a drainage easement out to frontage road. Okay, so I've hacked that one already.
You're doing great.
Yeah. And adding a condition, 4th condition, that the sidewalks on the north and south side of the road extend to the driveways of lots 8, 5, and 8.
So, let's back up.
I
for a
got that?
second. So we have a fourth condition in the staff report to,
Which one is number?
well, so I'm looking at Mackenzie's one she sent out
Oh,
this afternoon.
jeez. Yeah, sorry.
It's on your screen.
Thank you.
So, yeah, there's that fourth condition that's listed there.
Okay, so change my 4 to 5. How about that?
Okay, good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does
Complete
that-
sense?
does that
Is
cover
our
what you
recorder
need,
going to be
Lisa?
able to catch all that, Lisa?
Condition number 6, that the developer shall be required to provide a drainage plan and a long-term stormwater maintenance.
Maintenance agreement.
Did I not already include that in my amendment to 3?
Well, three's only supposed to cover the
You only want.
drainage out to the frontage road.
Okay, so you were creating that one as a separate one. I was adding it to 3, but you want that as a separate condition. Is that correct, Lisa?
I think it makes sense to have them separate.
Separate? Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
Okay.
Okay, let's keep those as separate. Then that would be, let's call that one number 6 then.
Great, number 6. Mackenzie, can you sort that out?
I'll work with Katie.
Don't make me, reasons for, yeah.
Action.
It's being
I don't know if we were
recorded.
given.
A, it's in the staff
A,
report,
it's
A.
on your,
Jeez, okay. Reasons for action, sorry, Mackenzie, I'm trying to go off my paper. Reasons for action, A, thank you.
I will
That was bad.
second that
Matt, don't try
motion.
that like that, that's bad.
That was good. So we have a motion and a second.
I second that, man. That's a pretty good motion.
So Becky, that motion didn't include sidewalks, did it?
Yeah, it
Yes.
Then I totally missed that part.
It was
was 5.
Number 5, sorry. It
right.
did get a little muddy.
Sorry about that. It's because I'm too far away. It didn't reach me.
I was buried in the written one where I should have been
Way
more
over there
looking
on
at
the
the
east.
Sure.
amended version, yeah.
It was the easterly winds.
Nice.
Thank you for bearing with me.
Any further discussion on our motion? Okay, well, let us start then with Commissioner Care.
Aye.
Commissioner Root?
Aye.
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 All right, that motion passes. Now, you want to redeem yourself with the second
So
motion?
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna let somebody else try that after that debacle. I'm gonna look at the screen
You don't want to
here.
redeem yourself? Come
Jeez,
on.
holy cow. That was a disaster. Yeah, I'll take a try. You only get better with practice, right?
Right.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and make a motion unless we want to talk more about this one.
Well, let's make a motion and we'll
Okay,
talk about it.
Perfect. I hereby make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for the Lane subdivision at 644 West, 400 South, with the following conditions, 1 through 6, adding number 7. In this case, we want the wrap-around sidewalks extending to the north in front of lots 5 and 8. Number 8, that a long-term maintenance and detention agreement be put in place. And storm drain, thank you. Storm water, thank you. And I think there is an amendment to get out the storm drain to frontage road. Did we want to add that as an additional condition? Sorry, since I'm making the motion. Is that part of
Yeah,
one of
Lisa,
them?
you want the
Lisa?
drainage easement on this one too?
Yes.
Yeah, but is that part of one of the points here? Or is it a separate one? So let's create that as number 9, will be to extend that drainage easement out to French Road.
Suggested reasons for action.
Suggested reasons for action, A through, does it go past C? I can't see, just A through C, thank you.
Second.
Perfect. That was much better.
I'm glad I had a little whisper down. Heidi's gonna be so good at this next meeting.
Perfect. Okay. We can discuss this some more. Becky, did you want to discuss it some more? Okay. Any other discussion about this preliminary subdivision? All right, then this time we'll start down at that end with Commissioner Ray.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, that motion passes as well. Okay, thank you very much, guys.
And I mean that in all sincerity, Heidi. I was like, oh, yeah, she's telling me, yep, that, thank you.
Okay, let's move on now to the next item on our agenda. This is also a administrative decision. It's a final site plan, which does not come with a public hearing, for the Commons at Legacy Crossing. And we'll turn the time over to Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daley, members of the commission. I'm just going to step back a little bit for Commissioner Larson's benefit without trying to rehash the old history in extreme detail.
Thank you. It's a long history.
It's a long history. Well over 10 years ago, I think somewhere around 2010 or so, the city approved a rezone of property that involves the Megaplex Theater and all the development you see on the west side of the city. It's called the Legacy Crossing at Parish Lane. It was a commercial very high rezone, so it's our commercial use lists along with plan development overlay, which is different than the PUD. Plan development overlay is a system to go lay on top of the zoning to add or customize a negotiated process through a rezone. So it's a negotiated development based on the base zone of commercial very high, and allows the city and the developer to enter in their process of customizing a development, and the process to get a plan development overlay is a rezone. It's a legislative decision to get to that point. And so at this point, they've got, now we're into the administrative part, and nearing the end of this project's development life, hopefully, and it resulted into theater. Our West Side plan allowed some mixture of residential uses, so it becomes a development type concept. The project tonight before the commission is lots 2 and 3 of that development, and those are two properties located south of the Megaplex. Last February, the applicant went through a process where they wanted to change the layout and expectations, so a little modification to uses, a modification to what was at that time to be a common detention, and ended up not needed for the rest of the development. And so they wanted to change the location of their detention system, and it involved a plat amendment to make that happen, and a PDO amendment. And that PDO amendment went through that same legislative process. They wanted to add a few more uses on a limited basis. They wanted to move the detention, and the city approved it. And it's been through that rounds twice because there used to be an office component to what the layout is now, and that office component was removed. But that plat amendment last February stays in effect for a year, so they're not changing the plat amendment per se. It's in effect. They're just coming and redoing the site plan from last February to involve only the retail component and removed the office component. And they did add a few limited uses to the project regarding recreational vehicle sales, some vehicle sales, and a drive-through facility. It was added to their uses to the project. So what you're seeing is a culmination of 9 to 10 months of time. It's predominantly now focused on the retail layout of buildings, and they're coming back in for their final site plan approval the commission saw a few months back. One thing to point out, the PDO rezone was enacted by the city council. There is a second element to that PDO rezone. It's a recording of a development agreement, and that development agreement reflects, by contract, if you will, recorded against the property, as was the original PDO, recorded against the property. And that has not been finalized with the city council with their exhibits yet. We had some discussions at the Development Review Committee, where we're at with that. They've been working with Lisa to be on a soon agenda. I don't know which one. Was it scheduled for the next council agenda?
I think the November 3rd.
November 3rd, to finalize that development agreement portion where it changes the recorded component of the property and they have to sign an assignment assumption agreement taking over that land. So we just need to finalize those contractual agreements with the city. But the Development Review Committee indicated that part of those exhibits is knowing what the final site plan roughly is going to be. And so we felt like we could bring this forward to final site plan conditioned upon a couple of those elements taking place prior to the affecting the approval of this final site plan. But again, that's your discretion. It's not mandatory. It's your discretion as a commission whether you want to grant final site plan. We've gone through, and I think they've addressed, from our perspective, a good portion of the requirements of their original approval, their PDO approval and their conceptual. An example is there's the 4-foot perimeter park buffer that's supposed to be on the site plan. It looks like they have plenty, it just wasn't dimensioned. And so you see a lot of the staff's recommendation is trying to tie that up. You also see the issue of lighting. They propose to do the wall pack lighting for the buildings, and you're not required to have the pole lighting per se by ordinance, but your nighttime use of the parking lot has to have minimum illumination. And they believe they can do that with the wall pack lighting, but that hasn't been verified yet. And so you see another condition if you move it forward would be to address that. And so those are some of the highlights that I'm just pointing out to make sure that you kind of understand where we're coming from. We've recommended approval. It's tried to be very specific about making sure the development agreement, so that if you moved it forward, it would not take effect, if you will, similar to other rezones. It doesn't take effect until you accomplish X, Y, and Z. So we want to make sure that if you decide to move it forward, it would be on the condition that the development agreement and its exhibits get submitted and approved by the council, that the plat amendment is prepared and taken place, because we need that plat changed. Because if you see on the west side, and I don't know if it's bottom or top on the visual, nope, it's to the left. It's to the left. Well, on this one, it's the bottom. The other one, it was to the left. This one's the bottom. That triangular piece was the old detention area, and you can see that the building occupied there. And they're going to an underground detention system that our city engineers reviewed and basically is approved. So, so we need to get that plat changed to remove that common area out and move that to detention. And so we need to make it effective on the plat amendment taking place. I've also recommended that we approve it for the retail uses, because that's what's shown on the plans. They can address their anticipation for future uses, like the vehicle sales and the recreational vehicle sales. I think the recreational vehicle sales is pretty easy because that's all to be conducted indoors. The vehicle sales for some, I would lack a better, some niche car system or custom cars that they're planning is allowed to take up to 10 stalls. You see they're over parked by 60, so they're allowed to take up 10. That could be reviews. The drive facility is the one thing that I know the commission discussed, and I'm not sure, as I got reflecting in the site plan, you see a drive-through facility, it has the queuing lanes, and the drive-through facility will be on the west side of the building, or bottom in this case, and it's on the right side of the building where you can see that landscaped island in the drive. So they have the queuing space, but I don't know what the drive-through facility is for. And that's one thing I find interesting, and why I've limited it to retail uses is because is there additional uses anticipated with this drive-through facility, or is it related to retail? And I think that's something I don't have clarity on, because then we have to look at the uses approved. Does it come under the CVH? Does it come under the development agreement? And I just don't know what the anticipation of the drive-through facility would be. So I found that kind of interesting, and so I wrote, if you move it forward, that right now we're just looking at this as everything is retail, and if your retail works with the drive-through, that's great.
We did spend a lot of time talking about that last time. And the stacking and all that other business, and so.
We did talk about it, so I've left it at retail uses only, and maybe the applicant can weigh in on what they're thinking, and we can have a dialogue about that a little bit.
Okay.
And then, again, it's just a site plan verification mostly, to make sure. And then, as I have recommended in the past, and the council has allowed in the past to a certain degree, is to allow the zoning administrator, which I actually function as the community development director, I also function as a zoning administrator. And you've delegated opportunities for me to verify those things, if you're comfortable. And then what we do to hiccup that is if I go crazy one morning because I haven't had my Coke Zero and there's a disagreement, it comes back to the planning commission to resolve that disagreement first before it can go through a process to the Board of Adjustment for appeal. Because you're basically, if you move this forward, you're entrusting that I'm enforcing your approval. And if there's a disagreement about enforcing your approval, you need to be the body to agree with that first. So that's, and then the other issue that I was unaware of, the plans came in as all one development. And so if it's being constructed as an entire development and it's building pads, that's one thing. If it's the idea that we're only going to construct the first northern half of the development and then the southern half comes at some other time for bonding, now we have the issue of, does the parking cross over correctly? Is the detention installed first? Do we have the improvements that if you're going to leave a vacant portion of land, at least the phase that was developed is functional? And that's a commission discretion to allow a phasing plan. We automatically assume it's one build. Obviously, buildings can come in phasing. You don't have to build it all one right away. But in order for your bond reductions and your infrastructure reductions and all of those to take place, you complete the entire improvements for the entire two properties. And so maybe they can talk about if they're thinking of a phasing plan. And so I wrote in here that right now we're going to just treat it as one development approval. And if there is no discussion of phasing, that's great. If there is a want for a discussion of phasing, that would be something that would come back to you and we would discuss how the phasing would work. And so that should cover it, hopefully in brief, unless you have questions. We're recommending approval, but I think there is some dialogue with the applicant for clarity.
Perfect. Thanks, Corey. Do we have any questions for Corey about the write-up or anything that Corey's talked about?
I had a question on the site plan, the parking to the north. Is there some shared parking in the count?
That's a great question because
As far as overflow,
we've had multiple discussions. The first reiteration started out as the original development does have a shared parking. The most
And for context, the original development includes
These lots.
theater, the whole entire development, not
The
just.
apartments?
Yeah, the
Apartments,
apartments, the office buildings, yeah.
It's all shared and a cross-access to it. The most controversial in the past is that the residential units have one stall for each unit, and then they share the second stall. And that's been problematic because where the residents like to park and where the theater patrons like to park became the same spots. And so that's created some consternation in the past about adequate parking. But it is adequately parked. They are over-parked for the entire development as a whole. At some point in time, they did come in and wanted to allow the excess on the remaining parcels to function as part of their original count. That has since been eliminated, just for clarity of the rest of the commission. They are now self-parking for retail, and they're plus the 60 stalls
So they have to meet the count within their
within their development.
But
But
what you just said, Corey, is within the retail, this kind of site plan proper, you're already meeting that. So the additional 60 is somewhere blended in
no, they're
rest of
over
the
the
development?
they're over the 60 now. They have 60 plus for the site, if I'm correct, in our counts. So
60 for just this site package.
they're over 60 just for the retail.
That's
Okay,
great.
okay.
So they are self-parked and have additional, but they're maintaining from a few months back. They're going to they were separated out at one point in time from the shared for the master development because they were thinking of a different direction for the lots 2 and 3. They're going to go rejoin the cross parking still. So now this site with its extra 60 stalls will join
And help.
with the rest of the development.
That's
And they
great.
will cross park
Have
and share.
access and, yeah.
So they're rejoining that cross, but they are self-sufficient on site.
That's really good. Does that parking allotment change with usage? I mean, is there any other, like, isn't retail, I can't think, like, if it's a
Retail is-
restaurant, maybe?
Yeah, retails are second most aggressive parking
Yeah.
at 4 per thousand.
Okay,
Our highest parking is 5 per thousand on office. But this project, even though it has office, was approved at 4 per thousand. So they're keeping within the original 4 per thousand.
okay. Just curious, restaurant, what's that one, parking
Is that
wise?
4 per thousand
That's
as
the
well?
4?
I know it's not a 4 per thousand because they go with seating capacity on restaurant,
Oh,
if I
okay.
remember right.
Does the movie theater have its own thing?
Theaters have its own parking accounts.
Cool,
Okay.
great, thanks.
Any other questions for Corey?
I have questions.
Yes.
So you can count your sidewalk as part of your landscape?
Yes, our ordinances allow 15% of your hardscape if there are dedicated pathways that were planned into the development, plazas, fountains, water features, things like that. You can use 15% of that as your landscaping. Doesn't have to all be plantings. You can use up to 15%.
15% of the required
Of the required
landscape?
15%,
15% of the required 15% can be hardscape.
correct.
And did you see their calculation? Or you're just guessing that it works?
No, they provided their calculation.
Didn't it
To-
provide it to me?
No, it's a table on the, if you look at the amended C-100, you'll see the civil plans, and then there should be an attachment that I think it says site plan C-100. There's a tabulation table on that.
Cool. It's just not on the landscape plan?
Right.
Hit it. Okay.
They hit it because we had to,
There's not,
we
what
had to
you're saying, Heidi,
recalculate.
is they're not a separate set of landscape plans, they're including their landscape plans on their civil set.
No, there's a separate landscape plan.
Oh,
Yeah, there's some landscape plans. Yeah, I had a question on that during the submittal process, and they just amended their site, the landscape
But
calculation.
are
They
you
had
saying
their
the
civil do it
tabulation?
rather than the landscape.
Yeah.
are you saying
yeah.
the tabulation for the landscape is on the civil set?
It's on the amended civil set, yeah.
Yeah, because on their
I don't
landscape
know.
plan, it only says
Yeah.
12.5%.
Yep.
So they've amended it by not adding more landscape, but by counting
Using the
sidewalk
pathways.
as landscape.
Yep.
Do we have in our ordinance or that governs this that says every X number of stalls you need to have a parking island to break up the expanse and sea of parking?
The original ordinance is 25, for every 6 parking stalls, 25 square feet. But on the amended PDO, the landscape islands were depicted, and so it's a custom amount originally depicted.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Their conceptual plan trumps the ordinance. So what they showed on their PDO concept plan for
With
internal
no parking lot islands, then they got out of it?
if we approved it with no parking lot island.
Nice of us. Okay. That's terrible. I don't want to park here. There's no shade. This is terrible. Like, I don't even want to come.
Let's go at night.
Yeah, right.
You could make a legislative recommendation to the city council.
I'm just in my own personal world of ideals. If they're overparked by 60, they have room to add a few parking lot islands to provide some shade.
Don't disagree.
That's
Yeah.
in my own idealistic world.
I like that.
Yeah, the PDO specifically said the layout, building layout and parking was approved.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Corey? All right, let's invite the applicant to come forward and
Actually, I had a
Oh.
question for Lisa.
time out.
Sorry. So this is, much of this question is directed towards my own education. When we're reviewing site plans and we're working through an administrative question and we're just trying to see if it fits the ordinance, when we stack on conditions, eventually those conditions converted almost into a legislative decision, sort of. After a certain point, it sort of twists the ordinance to a degree that you're like, well, if it says it shall in the ordinance and yet we're putting it as a condition of approval, why are we not just waiting until it's done and then approving it? This is one that it just, there's a little bit in my heart that says, you know what, there are so many conditions here, how are we not running afoul of our administrative duties of requiring compliance with the ordinance rather than saying, what we're saying here is that, go ahead, let's just hope it all works out. And pardon me for the paraphrasing. I don't know, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had this discussion probably every meeting.
I know.
We have a very different planning commission. Historically, we have added conditions. We just think they're little boxes and we give the applicant time to get them done after approval. You don't have to. You have the authority to say it says shall and I want it there. I think from a legal standpoint, you also have the authority to conditionally approve. I think our ordinance even recognizes the authority of conditional approval. And so whatever this commission feels comfortable with staff, you know, checking off the boxes later. In terms of balancing those interests, I think that if the issues are significant, if we're not very close on coming to a solution, you know, maybe it's not ready. But if we need 5 more trees, it's not really, I mean, you could make them wait a month or 2 weeks, but I think that's completely up to the planning commission. And if you really want to go in that direction, believe me, staff is hearing you.
Right.
And I think staff is pushing back on applicants and saying, you know, but we have a very lengthy process. We hold people up for 3 weeks. They submitted this 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so when we say it's not ready, they kind of go to the back of the queue and it's really hard.
Right.
And so we're just trying to balance that, but you can certainly table it. If it's a shall and it's not here, you can table it. You have full authority.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I think that's good discussion. For me, and I'm not an attorney, but it just kind of depends on the size of those boxes, right? Like, it's kind of like you were saying, Lisa, are we talking about 5 trees? Or are we talking about this building is too far, whatever, blah, 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 blah.
The likelihood.
Because if you move the building, then it might actually tweak something on the parking, because this is a very intelligent and observant planning commission. And, you know, that's why we bring things to you. And so I do agree. There are some of these things that we probably should table. But let me just give you an example on the other one. I'm very concerned. I share your concern about the easement on the last one. That project isn't going to happen if we don't have that. But we have checks in place. I mean, we send out approval letters after every approval. We have to give the applicant notice of what was approved and all the conditions. And so when it comes time for the building permit, Donna checks those conditions. When it comes time to recording the plat, Corey checks those conditions. So that's kind of how we follow through on things, because there's a lot of other permits and things, and so we check with that list. But again, you know, maybe if it's something that's going to change and that this body really needs to see and maybe weigh in on, like stacking, because they did rearrange the stacking, and I think that's something that you want to see. So I'd say just look through those conditions and see if it's ready.
Yeah, one of the other things that we balance at a staff level is that there's a couple of things going on. In the development community, there's always pressure that cities take too long. I worked for Summit County, and it was 2.5 years before you got to a planning commission agenda. And it was miserable working there for the 3 years that I was there, because there was 120 applications waiting to get into a process and a queue, and they had to be perfected. And it frustrated a lot of people. But then you would see the sewer district show up, and somehow 6 months later, they're on the site place and getting approved. So there's a lot of political things there. We're different. Since I've been here, the mantra is 21-day review. We're very, in some sense, it's a long time because we only meet twice a month, but we're very aggressive. We say 21 days, and they submit on a Wednesday, the DRC is meeting on a Monday, we're doing corrections that we best we can through that week. Everybody's trying to get their arms wrapped around it. By that next Monday, that's when we're really discovering where the problems are, because we've had a week to figure it out, finally. And I'm already starting the staff reports, and we're putting in exhibits by Thursday with the applicant, trying to get them into. Thus, you see the change on the civil plans for the landscaping table. So part of me feels obligated to that 21-day. Well, to perfect a plan in 21 days, not going to happen. And so now it comes down to that conditional approval. You know, you have right, and that's why hopefully I said to you, it's when your decision whether you want to grant approval. It's not my decision. I'm just crafting it, if you go that direction, you have it covered, what I think would be. But at the same time, you know, I don't want to be Summit County waiting 2.5 years to perfect a plan. And, you know, I've been accused, and I know planners, I want to take some badge for it, but then I don't want to take a badge for it. Too developer friendly, because we're moving in 21 days. But yet we establish that 21 day, and time is money on the developers, and, you know, we go through it. So, you know, an example is you got Summerhill Lane subdivision. It's been 2 years in the city. December will be 2 years. It's still not approved. But when they're ready to go, it's like, okay, we've had all these hiccups. We've got it all together, and you're going to take 6 more months? You know, so I don't want you to feel the pressure, maybe a little bit. I don't want you to feel the pressure too much, but I'm trying to honor that 21-day and get as best package as I can to you. And we had one like Truck World. They had a large lesson to learn. They're learning it, but it was a large lesson to earn. You know, most of the time we get to you, I think, reasonably, that it will actually work. But we use you sometimes to throw them under the bus, saying we don't think the commission will go for this one. So,
Mason, I also think, you know, there have been times where they've asked for multiple exceptions. I feel extremely uncomfortable with multiple exceptions on certain projects. But in a lot of situations, to me, it looks at, I look at the likelihood of the condition. Is this likely going to be, you know, achieved? Yeah, I feel a little more comfortable. If we have no information, they haven't started and who knows, or it's unlikely, I think that's really I think we're really in the purview of saying, you know, you're not ready for us.
I also think it's complicated by the fact that you have a PDO in place. The PDO is really the wrinkle in this, because it, as Corey said, in some occasions, it supersedes ordinance, and that requires a better detailed review at the initial stages during the development agreement, because now Heidi's like, what the crap is going on, you know? And she's like, I wish I would have been at the table, just being able to talk about some of these things that now a PDO doesn't allow us, or does allow us to do, frankly. It kind of goes both ways,
right.
for certain, but yeah, the point's well taken. But I think the conditions get longer with a PDO because of that.
All right, good discussion. Let's move along then. We'll get back to the applicant. We'll invite you for reals this time. Come up and introduce yourselves and discuss Corey's report, the staff report, any of the other items that you'd like to talk about.
Great. I'm Glenn Gersberger, and we thought we'd both come up because there are issues that we know separately on this project, so there's a lot of moving pieces.
And I'm Mitch Vance, both with J. Fisher Companies. I'll go ahead if that's okay. We've been working with staff for a while on this. I think the discussion you just had plays to a lot of our process as well. Every city's different. We do a lot of work in Layton, which I believe you're over at Layton, and their process in a lot of cities is you go through a couple of reviews with staff before you go to planning commission to minimize those. Like Corey said, you guys are quick, and we take a long time to get the plans to the point where we're comfortable with them with our consultants, and then we submit them to Corey, and he flips it around pretty quick. And so a lot of these conditions are somewhat new to us as well, because they're the staff review comments, but we talk it through with Corey, and we're very comfortable with them, because they are required by code or by the PDO, and we're ready to comply with that. So I think a lot of the comments here are pretty basic, just things that we might have needed to tweak on our plans, or dimension, or highlight so that it's clear that we're complying with that code. But we've worked a lot with staff. You have a great staff, and they've been really helpful, especially in this complicated process. I think when I was here last time for preliminary site plan, the big issue was that drive-through. We did look at that. We appreciate it because we had to think about it a little bit more. Move that window to the far south side of the building to add additional queuing, and then, like you recommended, we had that queue kind of cross the drive aisle and took out some parking stalls there to add some space for queuing. That's what I have.
Well, and ultimately, I think we explained before that we're creating a retail use, but retail is in such flux right now that we really wanted to build something that may accommodate lots of retail uses. So that's why you see this. You mentioned the drive-through. We just don't know what will come in the way of retail, so we wanted to make sure that we had at least one drive-through in this project, because it becomes so important for retail users today.
To accommodate some emerging retail.
Yeah, right.
Anybody have any other questions for the applicant?
I got a few questions. So staff brought up site lighting. Walk us through your decision on wall packs versus pole lighting, particularly on the perimeter parking areas.
Well, that was brought up by staff, and it caused a discussion amongst us. We were planning on wall packs. Glenn brought up that we probably want some additional pole lighting on the north side between us and the theater. As you may or may not know, we're part of this development, so the site layout and success, we're the HOA. We want it to work well, and in that specific area, we are going to add some poles.
Right, and safety is probably paramount for us, because we have a lot of those uses that may be late at night. We want to make sure that they're safe, so we will add that to the final site.
But you're only talking about the north side, you're not talking south and west side either?
I think we'll look at the lumens that we created by the wall packs and then fill in those voids so we have good coverage throughout the site.
Okay.
For lights.
Okay. A couple more questions for you. We talked about this last time you were here, the RV moto cells and how that's going to configure. I'm sure you are well aware that Young Power Sports is coming in across the way. How does that affect your potential user or your thought about having that use in your project? Is that just hoping you're still going to get your user, or is it just part of the nature of the market changing while we're getting approvals?
It's hedging our bets. The reality is when we've adopted that language, we actually had someone in mind for it. They no longer are part of the project, so it's a long shot.
Yeah. Okay.
But the conditions that have been placed on it, we're comfortable with moving forward.
Okay. To Corey's point, phasing plan.
We're going to do it all.
We're going to do it all at once?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's great. And then, again, on the drive-through, you talked about the drive-through window. Where is that? You say it's on the south side. Is that going to be a pop-out? Because I don't see a pop-out on that building wall. I see it on the north side. I see it on the north side, but not on the south side.
Yeah, go ahead. You can point that out over there.
Here.
This is actually
Okay,
Well,
that's
this is
when
the
you.
civil. Do you want the site plan? Or
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't-
that's true. I was looking at the civil. So, but the civil would show a pop-out if there were. I guess maybe it wouldn't because it wouldn't be on grade.
He's saying on this.
Said they moved
It should be on the south side. So that's why I was trying to see a pop-out.
Pull your site-
That was the civil set, so
pull your site plan.
I just want to make sure that I understand where that drive-up window was, because I saw that pop-out and I thought, well, that's on the north side of the building, not on the south side.
Well, if you go to their elevations, it'll show it on the south side. Those are the pop-outs for the detail on the building. Because every building has one of those little,
Right, and that's why I was a little,
but
So those are right there too.
You
Go
want
up.
it, this one?
but if you look at the elevation plan,
which elevation do you want to, what sheet do you want me to look at, Corey?
I don't remember the name of the sheet.
Building 2.
Yeah, scroll down the elevations.
It's okay, I don't feel pressured, I just want to see it. We can take our time. We can take our time, yeah. You're probably just as confused as we are.
Is this one building 2?
I think it goes back up, Mackenzie.
I'm just trying to find out what sheet is building 2.
Is this it? Yeah. Hold on, let me zoom in for you.
Just see the elevation portion. These are the footprints.
It's
Other
the other,
side.
other
Other
side,
side.
Mackenzie.
Well, this one says building.
There we
1.
go.
Right there.
There you go.
Okay.
There's the pop-out.
Which sheet is that?
That
you're looking
it's
at?
page 5, I don't know what sheet, hold
Of
on.
architecture set.
Architecture set
A
AA.
101? Okay, perfect. Okay,
So we pushed that as far as we could to that south side of the building,
Right.
allowing for maximum queuing back.
and we appreciate you taking our comment to take out those other stalls for
I
allow
think
for that additional queuing.
I was gonna mention that too, with the way that you reconfigured those stalls, it kind of forces the queuing to stay within the project instead of spilling out into that.
Into the entrance there, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
If and when that does happen, you probably have to do some wayfinding on the street because somebody will inevitably be queued up
Cut them
where
off.
you've created the queue and somebody will try and pull in and you might have a fight between customers, so. Yeah, but we appreciate you taking note of our suggestion.
Well,
How
and
many
it-
cars are gonna be able to queue up there? Do you know?
So it'll be that plus across the way. You're gonna have at least two or three where the stalls were at before.
2 on the building, maybe?
No, you're gonna have more than that.
I think we
Three
were
or four or
three
five.
or 4 on the building.
In the building,
Another 2.
Okay.
yeah. So
And
you're
like,
gonna
like
have,
we mentioned in the last meeting, it's in our best interest to manage this well.
Yeah.
Striping, signage.
and I think Corey, you talked about last time, there is an ordinance in terms of stacking queuing number of stalls. So I
Depending on the
think
use.
this maybe exceeds it. Okay, sorry. That's all I had. Kevin.
Okay,
I have a question.
yes.
Can you tell me what happens between your property line and the train tracks? Like, what happens there? Is there like a fence? I mean, what just happens there?
We will have a fence along that edge.
Just like a chain
Uh,
link fence?
We haven't decided what that will
Oh, okay.
be. I think what we want to do is have that separation
Yeah. Because your parking goes really close to it.
for a couple of reasons. Mainly, we want that bifurcation between the two places. It's also a safety issue. But the city has a plan for water,
Storm drains.
stormwater.
We'll have a storm drain connecting. So the city's gonna, it's not needed for theirs, but we're gonna install a drainage system from the south end of the property along the east side, connecting to 200 North. We've already installed some improvements there at 200 North. It'll connect that open ditch.
So there's a landscape buffer there, and it's the city's responsibility to maintain that landscape buffer?
No, they will take care of it. We will have the pipe in it.
Who's going to take care of it?
At the railroad, right? No?
No, it's gonna be on their property line.
The new pipe is. The open ditch is not our property, so they're
Right.
gonna bring
Got
that ditch onto our property and we'll maintain the landscaping between us and the ditch.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for the applicant?
What do you think about some additional islands in the parking? I don't know. She said,
Well, I like your comment, though, because even everywhere in that complex, I look for shade every day. And I wish I had it. And he wishes he had a pickleball court.
I do.
I'd like covered parking if I could. It's just not, it's a point well received. It may be cheaper for us to add islands and trees than it is paved parking spaces. But then again, it's not often you have excess parking, like 60-plus units or spaces for retail is kind of nice. You just never know what use you're going to get and whether or not you're going to need it. So I hate to give it up, but point well taken.
I think Commissioner Chagrude has stated her case on excess parking in previous meetings. She's not a fan of excess parking.
Well,
I
and
mean,
if-
you drive past the movie theater, I understand COVID, but even go back then, nobody parks back there. It's always empty. That east side of the movie theater, nobody ever parks there.
freaky back there.
I mean, so your point that there's excess parking, it's like, great, but nobody,
Gonna walk over
nobody's
there.
gonna go over there, so
I
fill it
wouldn't
with
do
a
that.
tree, I guess.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, it's, just so you know, it's not noted that they don't have islands. It's presentation to the public right-of-way is where the islands are. But
Right, and it's not like we've got those big areas like behind the theater where we have a lot of excess parking.
Nope, it's
The
just
parking is
there
kind
near that train tracks, right?
On the east side.
Yeah.
Where it's a long, and even then, also on that south side, it's really long and contiguous without any, well, all of, you just don't have very many parking lines, which, if you've met your landscape requirement, then there's no mechanism to enforce more of them, so.
And keep in mind, another thing to keep in mind, along the freeway and along that railroad tracks, you want to keep those sightlines open to that retail, because that's really important to them. Big trees along there with.
I know. People don't like trees, but when you have a tree outside your retail, your sales go up 12%. So,
Not if they can't see you. That's the point.
but I'm just saying, if there's a nice landscape outside of a retail center, people are gonna stay more, they're gonna spend more, and so the desire to have a better landscape is always to your benefit. Maybe not right there, but
Well, and
everybody looks for the shade when they park, everybody.
another argument too is, it's great, you have 60 extra stalls, but you go and look at in between, Home Depot and
Kohl's.
Kohl's, and you've got
What happens?
the zone where you have to go through, and you're like, why do we have this? This could be utilized so much better. There could be something here. Even Target sometimes, how often even our previous planner went and took pictures of Target on Black Friday, and it was still not full. So, that's just a thing to consider too, what is best use of that space, and how can it really improve your project to be something that, like Heidi was saying, it can just draw people in and really elevate the whole thing.
As a side note, I'm also a little bit worried about building number 3, that middle space. They have they're really isolated from nearby parking.
Oh, yeah, you know what?
We're talking building 6?
3.
Well, it
3
says-
that
Yep,
one.
that's right.
On the south side,
That's-
the west side.
As the developer, those are ours. So we'll be using those for our various businesses. So we'll have people.
So you're less
coming-
worried about it?
Yeah.
Got it.
You gave yourself the
those
worst.
aren't,
That's right.
those aren't really retail.
What's that?
Not really retail.
We'll be using it we'll have a retail frontage on it, but then the back will be used for our various businesses that we have. So we have probably 5 business lines.
And then you're gonna make everybody who works in that building park over by the freeway and get their 10,000 steps in for the day. So that you can keep all the parking near that building, near all the other retail centers, open for their customers.
Just those that need the steps.
All right.
Sorry, I got one more question.
Okay.
What's your plan for the triangle open space behind that building? Because it's very cut off from the rest of your
Well,
development.
Underground.
yeah, well.
No, the underground
is
detention's
actually
right
the
there with that grid.
section.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
We're actually,
There's your pointer right there.
Pickleball court.
what we would like to do.
I
is
said that, do
take
it.
doors on the back here and improve this area, perhaps for some,
Pickleball?
For pickleball, for lunch, some sort of plaza area for your employee. So I'm 100 for that.
with lots of trees.
Can we make that a condition? Sorry.
Yes.
Back to my question about converting it to a legislative decision.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're legislating, Footsteps and pickleball courts
Right,
at
which,
this point.
which actually, I actually agree with, but it's, moving on. So you've read the conditions. Do you have objections?
No, we think that they're all reasonable and we can accomplish those. And the reality is we know that we won't get our building permit until they're all fulfilled.
Right.
So I think that's where you guys have the ultimate power, is that we don't get a permit to build unless we follow these.
Yeah, sure.
But we're comfortable with them. We think we can get those accomplished quite quickly.
Well, you say we think we can get those. I want to hear something different.
Oh, we will get those.
We understand we have
accomplished
to.
quite
Thank you.
quickly. We just know we
Very
can't
good.
proceed until they're done.
Very good.
And we have a real high interest in getting it moving along.
Of course you do. Yep. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? No, it's been a good discussion,
Yeah.
good conversation.
Great job.
We've veered off track several times, but it's okay. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Take a seat. This has not been scheduled for a public hearing, so we will move right along then. Any other discussion among the planning commission? Any other thoughts, comments, concerns?
Question on condition 5, Romanet 6. I believe the middle of the sentence is supposed to be tasks instead of talks.
Yeah.
Just having fun. We're going to talk together. Agree, come back to you. Tasks is correct.
Performing a talk. That's
Right. And then condition
lot of
3, I'm wondering what this is directed at. So isn't this just already default rules? In other words, why is this an additional condition? Is it just for clarity?
Two folds to it.
the PDO.
Yeah, and that's the PDO. So what happens inside our ordinance is, once the planning commission approves a site plan, you have a list of conditions that you place into there. If anybody wants to change that, it can be approved by the zoning administrator at that point. But the zoning administrator is not allowed to change a specific condition of approval. And so I'm trying to pair out that this opens up the opportunity that if they want to amend it, it can stay within that zoning administrator's purview, rather than saying, comply with this plan, and then we come back later, oh, you want to change that plan? Oh, we're back to the planning commission because you're not complying with that plan.
Yeah.
So that's the impetus behind it. Probably wordy, but that's the intent.
We'll take it.
Okay. Anybody else? Any conversations? All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, as noted in the staff report for the reasons noted in the staff report, with, yeah, that's it. With the one change, talks to tasks.
Seriously, why didn't I make that motion? Second.
For suggested reason for action, did you
Yeah,
say that?
suggested reason.
Yeah, he said.
As indicated.
There we go.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion, as described in the staff report. And a second. Any further thoughts, comments, discussion?
So I'd like to lead out. A lot of my questions today were directed towards making sure that I'm exercising my authority in a principled manner. I actually, from the very beginning, it may have felt like it was different. I actually like this, and I wanted to approve it from the very get-go, but I continue to feel some heartache, maybe heartburn is a better word, that the more we pile on, the less we're adhering to our role as commissioners.
Point.
But that's not this case.
No, that's fair. That's very fair.
Good point.
Okay, well then,
Well, I'll just counter that. Because I can. So, I think we are adhering to our role. I think putting these conditions in place adheres to our role and allows the process to continue, and very specifically delineates where the process needs to be completed. So I agree, I don't want to just be like, oh, you have this great idea, here's all the stuff you have to do, go for it. I think there's enough here, it's substantial enough, I feel really comfortable with it, and I don't think it's shirking our duties to look at a substantial proposal and still have, especially with the PDO, substantial conditions. So, just to be contrary,
I don't consider it that, but good. Well
that's all
done.
right. That's all right. Okay. Anything else? Let's start down here, Commissioner Care.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
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 All right, that motion passes. Thank you very much.
Good luck on your pickleball court.
If you get it, invite me over, let's play.
And
They'll
Chair
park far
Daly,
away and then walk
I got the
there.
message across the bow that when a PDO comes in without much landscape,
Yeah, no kidding.
I can start throwing the commission under the bus and saying, yeah, I don't think you're gonna do it.
That's our resident landscape expert. Love it. Okay, let's move along. We're coming down the home stretch now. We've got land use training.
Yeah.
So for Commissioner Larson's benefit, unfortunately, you're stepping in kind of toward the tail end of our land use training, but we've gone through the different sections of the code.
Yes, the entire.
And around the
Land Use
world
Management
at
Act.
the same time.
And
Yes.
and around the
I
world.
know, I don't have any pictures for you today. I'm sorry.
Oh, man, I'm out of here.
Mutual groans.
I
Lisa, she's been showing us
She does
pictures
a lot
of
of traveling.
Antarctica and Peru and
Galapagos
the
Islands.
Galapagos.
See what I've missed?
I know.
I ran out of,
Africa.
2020.
Rim to
really
rim
put
next
a
year.
damper in it. Anyway, we only have 2 more chapters, this one and one more that's quite short. But last meeting, we talked about internal appeals of our administrative decisions, which from the Planning Commission or the zoning administrator go to the Board of Adjustment. And this week's chapter is talking about decisions going to the district court. And so this chapter really.
Which is something we have happening right now.
We haven't,
It
I
hasn't.
can't think of anything that's gone to the
It
district
hasn't
court.
gone, it's just been appealed.
They
You're talking about
dropped it.
Summer Hill.
No, we dropped it. Oh.
So they appealed the preliminary plat, but that was withdrawn the day of the Board of Adjustment hearing.
I was going to make an exception. When you talk about Summerhill taking 2 years, it wasn't all staff and planning
Say
commission.
it wasn't our fault.
Yeah.
It was self-imposed, much of it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Keep on going.
That doesn't stop them
So anyway, I like the system that we have, even in the statutes. It says that, if you're going to have the zoning ordinances, you actually have to have an appeal process and this internal appeal. So our administrative decisions go to the Board of Adjustment, but if the city council makes a legislative decision, then it just goes directly to the district court. Or they could also appeal a Board of Adjustment decision. But what I like about the system is I like having that extra bite at the apple at the Board of Adjustment. I mean, we get to have our own citizens, and a lot of the Board of Adjustment are former planning commissioners, and so I really like that. But if it's a legislative decision or someone disagrees with the Board of Adjustment, we will go to the district court. But it does say that you can't go directly to district court. You have to exhaust your administrative remedies and try and go through the city's process first. You can't just go right to the court, generally. So, and you only have 30 days to do that after the final decision to go to district court. So what I like about this, it also provides the standard of review. We're always talking about whether it's a administrative decision or a legislative decision. And this is where it really makes a difference, because if it's a legislative decision, the standard of review is reasonably debatable. It's a very low standard. You just have to show that your decision was reasonably debatable to be in the public interest. Whereas if it was an administrative decision, which are all final decisions of the Planning Commission are administrative, and so there just has to be substantial evidence in the record to support your decision. So that's why we have all these findings, is to show that, we've discussed these items, and then we've also put some findings in there to say, yes, this is the substantial evidence in the record to support that. And again, I've talked about the case law over the years about how, they would just approve it, and then they said, well, no, you have to have some findings, and so then we had findings, but then the findings weren't supported in the record. And so you have to have the findings, and then you have to have either, testimony at the hearing or something in the staff report to support that. So.
And Lisa, last meeting, we talked about the first step, which is the Board of Adjustments, and how tight that timeline was to get an appeal made with the evidence included in it. And I think some some of the commissioners were shocked by how quickly that had to be done.
Yeah, 14, so then the district court is 30 days, so I mean.
Right, so it seems as though if the district court gives you 30, maybe there would be some discussion about making those commensurate.
And we can look at that, but then you'd also want to look at the stay provision, if you're going to extend that, the appeal period.
Okay.
So, and I also wanted to talk about the record, and this was something that kind of came up in our Board of Adjustment appeal. You know, we really had to look at our ordinances and whether we had the right standard of review. And there was some debate under our ordinances whether the Board of Adjustment hearing was going to be a review of the record or a de novo review. And the difference between that is if it's a review of the record, the Board of Adjustment's just going to read everything that you read. Everything that you read, you know, all the staff reports, everything that was in the record at the Planning Commission, and then determine if you made the correct decision based upon that record. Now, if we don't have a good record, or if our ordinances didn't say that it's on the record, then the Board of Adjustment, or even in this case, the district court, could just start new and, you know, take witnesses and take new testimony. And so, in my opinion, we don't want that. I think that really, in an appeal situation, we're just reviewing what the Planning Commission reviewed, and given the information that you had, did you make the correct decision? Is there substantial evidence in the record to support that? So, in my opinion, I think I successfully argued to the two other attorneys and our legal counsel that our ordinance said it's a review of the record, which in my opinion means we're not taking new evidence. But believe me, there's a lot of new arguments that come up at that point when you get the attorneys involved that may not have been involved in the beginning. And so there were a lot of new arguments, a lot of new evidence that they wanted to bring in. And I was glad that our ordinances said, no, it's just going to be a review of the record. And for the district court, as long as we have a reasonable record, then the district court is just going to look at the record. But if we don't have a record, which I can't imagine anymore these days, we have to record our meetings and all of that. So, you know, most of the time we're going to have a reasonable record. And we're also required in this 30 days, because for the district court, we actually have to get a transcript. So we have to take the recording and do the transcript and send the whole thing up to the district court. And it's a monumental task for some of these larger.
Lisa, you bring up an interesting point, because if somebody's going to bring up new arguments, what you're saying is, hey, that's not on the record. If you want to bring up new arguments, come to the Planning Commission again and have another discussion as it relates, not in a legal matter, not in an actual court case matter, but if you have an issue with our decision and you have new findings or something you want to bring up, are you kind of saying, come to the Planning Commission again? And let's just include those as new
Well, that might
points of
be, I
evidence?
think the basic idea is correct, but sometimes it's too late. So again,
Yeah.
if you didn't exhaust your administrative remedies or you didn't bring that up before, but the reason the law does that, in my opinion, is to give the Planning Commission the opportunity. You can't save your arguments for later.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes,
sometimes
and
you guys know
and
how that feels. People
and
wait till the city council. You're like, well, why didn't you bring your public comments to the Planning Commission? And I think that's what the law here is trying to support.
And
is that
I'm
it's-
agreeing with
It's
that
not
position.
for the district court. The district court does not really want to get into these individual zoning decisions. They don't want to replace your legislative body's decision for what's the best, you know, for Centerville in terms of land use. So, you know, and that's why I think we say that in our ordinances, yeah, bring up all your arguments that you can and tell the Planning Commission, because we, you know, our decision might be different if you had brought it up, but you can't bring it up because it's less efficient later down the road.
Essentially, be smart with your application. If it gets denied and you don't agree with it, don't take it further. Come back to the Planning Commission. Don't push it farther, because you're going to lose your,
Yeah, it depends who's
Ability.
appealing, whether they can even
Yeah.
raise that. I mean,
Okay.
I suppose if it's the applicant, they could, you know, reapply.
So can I ask a question just right there? If there's a denial at our level and they want to then reapply, is there a cooling off period?
Yes,
one
I
year?
think we have a.
Or
it dep-
rezones.
Yeah, it's certain applications, and it may
6
only,
months.
it's
Okay.
just the rezone, yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
if you denied a site plan, they could just go back in, reapply,
yeah,
and
you
fix
can
it.
come in a few weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we could adopt an ordinance that just says, look, for any applications that's denied, and I think for the rezone, it has to be a substantially similar, like we have had some situations where they say, well, I'm gonna reduce the size, or I'm gonna reduce the zone, or change the zone, and so in those cases, they can reapply, immediately, but we could also think about adopting an ordinance that just says, yeah, if you wanna reapply, because, again, we wanna be efficient, we spent all this time, but I don't know, I can't think of a time that that's happened, so that's one of those ordinances, rather than having, a 2,000, 20,000 page zoning code, we're gonna wait till we have a serious problem with it, I think, because I can't imagine, I don't think we've had that, where they've just reapplied for a site plan. I mean, it's not necessarily in their best interest either. So we talked about the record. One thing, we didn't have very many legislative updates to this section, but I did hear that there was recently an appeal, I think it's at the Court of Appeals, but they're currently arguing about this exhaustion of remedy. So you may say, who's ever going to bring this up? But I think there was an appeal to the Board of Adjustment by a group of residents, 10 individual residents, and they appealed to the Board of Adjustment. And then they want to appeal that to the district court. Again, you have to exhaust your administrative remedies, which means go to the Board of Adjustment, and then they had formed a group, and that group appealed to the district court. And the city or the county is arguing this group didn't exhaust their administrative remedies because they weren't the group at the Board of Adjustment. So I think it's a really interesting, I'm just thinking, perhaps substitution of parties, or, I think there's some other way to maybe remand it or add parties, but it's making its way, people are arguing over these very issues and taking it to the Utah Court of Appeals. And then the last thing in this section is just the penalties, and we do have different kinds of penalties for our zoning code violations. We can either do a civil penalty or we can do a criminal penalty. And a few years ago, they said, look, if you're going to do a criminal penalty for any kind of zoning, it can only be a Class C misdemeanor. Now, most municipal violations, we can go up to a Class B misdemeanor. But on zoning violations, it can only be a Class C. And there was somewhere in here just above where it said it could only be an infraction. Oh, right here. It's an infraction to erect or construct any building without approval of a building permit. And so anyway, as an attorney, as you're reading this, is like, okay, well, why is that a building permit thing? And then they just call it an infraction. I would normally think a building code violation is going to be a Class B, but anyway, that's why we read these things every once in a while. So that's hidden in there, if you ever want to bring that up. But generally, it's just a Class C. And, they do have some provisions in here about providing notice to people. And this is in 2012 is when they added all these, that if you're going to impose some sort of civil penalty, you have to give them notice, you have to give them an opportunity to correct, so it takes time, and we have to provide all of this notice. So that is it for district court review. And yeah, I don't know, Corey, have we ever had a land use decision appealed to district court?
Not why I've been here. We had one case that was considering district court, but settled before we went to district.
So we haven't seen that. We do have appeals to the Board of Adjustment. But the district court review, it is a hard standard, on these legislative decisions to really get overturned at district court. So I think that's why we haven't seen that many, because the law, the statutes and the case law are still in our favor, as long as we make reasonable decisions. And that's why Corey and I are always saying, if you're going to deny a rezone, I don't want to be the first city that changes that, because we were so unreasonable in our denial of a rezone. So.
Yeah, that one case, we had to go to the Board of Adjustment in favor of the decision, and then before it ended up in court, the city council settled.
So, okay, well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
There were some, I think, important concepts there, and I know I went through it quickly. And
No, that's all
Matt,
right.
we're happy to talk
way
about
behind.
administrative, legislative decisions and.
Love to do that.
You know, Lisa, even though you haven't gone to Galapagos every year, you can take a picture of like your small travels in 2020, like to the store or wherever.
To the store.
Put that in there.
how about
I'd like
like-
to see like a 2020 travel.
Okay,
You're gonna say back home to
My-
California
I don't
or
know. How
something.
about
My
like-
deck, my kitchen
That's
table.
what I'm saying.
my
That's what
my
I'm
kitchen-
saying. You know, like I
Sometimes
think
the
you could make
basement.
it interesting.
Or you could just make a multiple choice. Where should I go, planning commission? A, B, C, and we'll pick your next vacation.
Oh.
All right, thank you, Lisa. That's very good. So one more chapter? Is that what-
Yes, and
Okay.
it's something about critical infrastructure, so it's gonna be really exciting, and it's only 2 pages.
Okay,
I was gonna combine it with this, but I felt like this had some important points.
okay. Thanks,
Great,
Lisa.
thank you.
All right, let's move along then to our Community Development Director's report and City Council report and goals. Corey?
Yeah, so your meeting for 27th, we have 3 items, 4. I think we've also got the plans confirmed for the ACC Truck World plan. So you have 4 items scheduled. City Council report, they approved the CH to CVH rezone of that little linear parcel behind
Corey,
frontage road.
Before you go too much farther,
Yeah.
on Summer Hill Lane, how do you need to give us any color on that?
No, I think the Summerhill Lane's coming in for the final. It's pretty straightforward with their submittal requirements. I mean, there are the issues that you're aware of to be discussed, and we have looked at their submittal and their title reports, and we'll be able to give you what our answer is on those matters.
Perfect. Look forward to that.
I just only bring it
That's
up,
it.
just because that was a contentious one between residents and involving staff and the city itself, so I
Yeah,
just wanted to.
I don't think that goes away, but I think the ordinance, from my perspective, has the answers for us, so.
Okay.
I just
There's
said,
another public hearing on that one, right?
that's
Not on the final here, but there will be a public hearing at the council on the final. So
Okay.
this one will strictly be just a public meeting.
okay. All right. I was thinking about how to address that if we have a whole group of people show up and we don't let them talk, so, okay, we'll talk about
So
that.
that kind of, I just want to be prepared.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Is there a way, I know sometimes we've given public hearings even when they're not required. Would that be something that you'd want to do here or no?
You want Corey, the PR person, or Corey, the attorney?
Well, Corey's not an attorney, so.
Well, I know,
There's one on TV.
That's when I turn over, if you say attorney, that's when I look over to
I was
Lisa.
gonna say Lisa, the attorney, maybe.
I know Lisa doesn't like us to hold public hearings if
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
not
if you're
required
required
to.
to.
Right, I mean, if you were an applicant and you're not required to have a public hearing, and then you have a public hearing and people make comments against your project, I think it,
I think it opens
Open the
exposure
door.
to
Exactly.
the city. If the ordinance says it's not a public hearing,
Well, my
you
vote
shouldn't do a
is no.
public hearing. I mean,
We just have in the past. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah, we had public hearings, remember, for like a long time, we had public hearings, and even though we weren't required to, and we went through, should we maintain this public hearing?
No, but our ordinance said we had to, the state.
just meant it
code
wasn't
says it doesn't.
statutorily
Yeah.
required, maybe? But our ordinances.
No, Becky's right. There's been times where we've
the chair is-
just
the chair is
assumed that
now
they all
like
come with a
this.
public
Well, I was
hearing,
gonna
and we
say-
held public hearings for final site plan.
I've been on the commission as long as Becky has, and I don't remember.
Well, you know, maybe you forgot. or
Maybe I'm getting
something.
old? Okay, all right, well.
But Becky's right. We've held hearings when that's not.
How was that decision made, Becky?
That one, most of them have been kind of habit that you,
Yeah.
oh,
How do you?
now it's time for the public hearing, and so we open it up, and staff has gone, it's not a public hearing.
That had to have been under the Hershey administration.
You know, David's gonna PR, so maybe it was. Maybe.
All right, We can talk more about that later.
Or
Meaning
me
you
and Becky
don't wanna
have
talk
a
about
bad memory, but
That's fine.
Well,
If you don't want to hold it, that's fine.
here's the
This is
thing.
when we talk about it, is right here.
No, but I guess here's the
So-
thing, is that I think the appropriate time to talk about that would be at that meeting. If we wanted to do something like that.
Except for that you're supposed to,
You
Notice.
Public, you have to notice it.
That's,
so this is the public, this is the time. And if you guys don't want to do it, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so
I
talk
just
about
am
this,
just
Lisa.
bringing it up.
If we don't notice it for a public hearing, but could we as a commission say we want to open this up for the public? Or do we get ourselves in trouble that way?
That's even worse.
Well, I think both of them have problems.
Yeah,
I don't
Our
want to do a
ordinances
public
don't
hearing.
require it.
open for a public hearing if it's not open.
Well, here's,
Can't you just say that if you wish to send in public comment, that you need to do it at the proper time, which at this point now becomes the city council meeting? I mean, if
That's
someone comes.
exactly what we can say.
If someone comes and they wish to give public comment, then our response is, this is not the appropriate venue. Thank you for coming. We're interested in hearing what you have to say, but this isn't the appropriate venue, and you need to
Yeah, you
take
can-
comments to the
you
city
can let them
council.
know that the previous steps held those hearings. And
we've had,
But I
we've had
think, I think
several.
what Heidi's saying
Can
is,
I-
we don't want to be dismissive out of
No.
hand. You would say, you have an opportunity,
Yes.
this isn't it, it is at the
Yes.
city council.
Right,
Yes.
right.
From
Well,
from a PR standpoint.
We have talked about changing the ordinance, so it's just a three-step where we have, planning commission does conceptual and preliminary, and then city council does final, or, we take out one of those steps, but we've always said that we like the final going to the planning commission, because the planning commission is the only one that sees the preliminary. So if we just cut the planning commission out of final, you don't get to check all of your conditions,
Yeah,
and you
Yeah.
know the final plat's actually, I think you spend more time than the council.
All the
on-
conditions we imposed on it, right, Mason? Is that why you're chuckling?
Right, well,
Yeah.
so, so it's not necessarily that you need additional public comment. You took it at preliminary, you're just making sure that those
Well-
conditions were met and that it's ready for the city council.
And if you look at it purely from the land use standpoint, once you're in the administrative, and some cities do, it's a very difficult thing to convince the council, but the planning commission becomes the final decision on a subdivision, not the city council. Because too often the city council can mix their administrative hat with their legislative hat. And you'll hear trainings just saying, get your council to turn it over to the planning commission. And keep it in an administrative process.
And let me just say one last thing. I'm not in the interest of opening the city up to additional, problems legally. And I am not also a PR specialist, so I'm not saying that we should, have all these public meetings. That said, I have been to several public meetings, school board meetings, other city council situations, and especially when it's something that is so important to the community, and we've had a lot of feedback and discussion, it does seem that, there's certain places where they have a rule where you can only talk for 60 seconds and da-da-da-da, and that feels very,
Non-friendly.
Restrictive.
it feels very dismissive,
Yeah.
is what it feels like. So I'm not saying to open us up, and I'm fine if the commission does not want to do a public hearing, but just know that the Summerhill Lane development has been very concerning to a lot of residents. So if we come and we say, oh, you can do this later, just know that that might be something that we may receive some feedback on.
I like to follow the rules, and the rules say that it's not now. And I just think that you clearly explained that, and that's why we have an ordinance. If we're just winging it, why do you have an ordinance to govern you?
And I think it's in the way that it's presented. It's, hey, we love your feedback, we love that you're here, but this is not a public hearing. The place to do it is at city council, so we want to encourage you to come to that meeting where it is a public comment period, as opposed to this meeting per the ordinance. And if you don't like the ordinance, that's also a great opportunity to say you don't like the ordinance and you want that to be a public hearing and talk to the legislative body as opposed to the administrative body.
Yeah, and I think kind of along those lines too, the public can come on a preliminary and tell us, hey, did you think about this? Did you consider that? Consider this, whatever else? And then we put it back to the applicant to go and fix whatever we decide needs to be fixed or whatever those concerns that were raised by the public at that point. But then to come back at the final, you know, the public might want to say, hey, did you think about this or think about that or whatever else? And it feels a little bit disingenuous to the applicant now that we keep on moving that finish line,
Yeah.
right? And so that's why I'm inclined
sure.
to not do it at the final and just
There you go.
say, thank you, you've had, you know, thank you for the previous comments we've had. We've incorporated those into our decisions that we've made and move along, so.
I think, and I'm totally good with that. I think if there is someone that does show up, if we can, as a planning commission, make sure that we explain the process to them, I think that's
Sure.
going to be really important.
Yep.
Obviously in a non-dismissive way, but especially just because they were not everyone was part of the process. So when they sometimes aren't in at the right spot, it might just be important for us to help them understand that we want you part of the process. And just because this is like a time where it is not appropriate for you to be part of the process, you can still be part of the process.
Yeah, well, I think we'll explain the process, so.
Great.
Okay. Corey, back to you.
Always the fun of being in the planning commission, isn't it? It's hard for you guys to wear your citizen hats and your administrative hats with people that you share common interests in the community. It's really hard. But, so I appreciate your discussion. City Council did approve the Young Power Sports. I think I mentioned that. And finally, I don't know why it's taken so long for city administration, but I'm going to throw them under the bus. We finally got the contract signed for the ESI for the parking.
Oh,
September 7th, I submitted that.
okay.
Taking this long to get a signed copy. Sorry, that shows you how I've been frustrated. But anyhow, we've got it signed, so we'll start that contract with ESI for your goals, and I didn't include your other goals. You still have that general plan, and the budget have been approved by the city council after the hearing in August. We anticipate that take place after the end of the year. Lisa is working on the subdivision. We know that's on your goal list. And we have the infamous food truck.
I was just gonna ask you, what about the food trucks, Corey?
Wrote a draft.
Right there between.
I've been working on it this week. I decided to tackle one of the small, so,
Bite size.
but I didn't want to send it to Corey the same day as a planning commission meeting. I don't want to send it to him the day before the planning commission meeting, or the Friday before, so anyway, it'll get over to him pretty quickly.
Okay. Sounds good.
You're very thoughtful.
Thank you.
It's all about timing on that email.
Okay, let's move along then to the last item on our agenda, which is a review of our minutes from the previous meeting. For your benefit, Commissioner Larson, we used to do this at the beginning of the meeting. We push it to the end of the meeting, mainly so that applicants and public that were here wouldn't have to sit and listen to us potentially debate what we had actually said at the minutes of the previous meeting, so anyway, that's why. Okay, let's go through these page by page in the customary fashion for us. Well, anybody have any suggested changes for page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Awesome. Anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, but I don't know the right words to say. A motion to approve the minutes.
Perfect.
As unamended.
That's good enough. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a motion, we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Wilcox with the second. We'll do this one all together. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.